A weathered cowboy marked his third day at the dusty station when a trembling girl approached. "Will you marry my black mommy instead?" The saloon erupted in cruel laughter while storekeepers shook their heads in disgust. The black woman cleaning hotel floors was destined for a life scrubbing other people's dirt, invisible and forgotten. Yet the mountain man didn't laugh. He studied the child with unexpected kindness. What they didn't know was that the dismissed cleaning woman held secrets that could reshape their entire town. And the lonely cowboy carried wounds that only an unlikely family could heal. Their worlds should never intersect. But one innocent question had set forces in motion that would either destroy them all or reveal that society's forgotten souls possess the greatest power. Would this moment unite them against impossible odds, or tear apart the only chance any of them had at belonging? 3 days earlier, Ezra Thornfield had stepped off the afternoon train clutching a letter from Sarah McKenna. She promised to meet him at Millbrook Station wearing a blue bonnet. He waited through sunset, then through the night, then through 2 more sunrises. Now townspeople whispered behind cupped hands. The merchant's wife clicked her tongue. The banker shook his head. Even the station clerk avoided eye contact. Ezra understood their looks. A man waiting 3 days for a woman who clearly wasn't coming painted a pitiful picture. Across the dusty street, Celeste Washington scrubbed the hotel's front steps. She'd started before dawn, same as always. Her calloused hands worked the brush in steady circles while 8-year-old Ruby sat nearby, sketching letters in the dirt with a stick. Judge Silas Blackwood emerged from the bank, adjusting his gold watch chain. His eyes swept the scene with practiced authority. The waiting cowboy, the cleaning woman, everything in its proper place, maintaining the natural order. Martha Greenfield watched from her hotel doorway. She'd owned the establishment for 2 years, ever since arriving from back east. Her guests never questioned why a woman ran the business alone. They appreciated clean rooms and fair prices. Celeste had worked for Martha since the beginning. She cleaned with unusual precision, organized supplies with mathematical efficiency, and somehow knew exactly which remedies helped sick guests recover faster. Martha had learned not to ask too many questions about her employees' surprising capabilities. Ruby finished her letter practice and wandered toward the station. She'd watched the sad cowboy for 3 days now. Her mother always said lonely people needed kindness most. The child approached Ezra's bench. Her small voice carried across the platform. "Will you marry my black mommy instead?" Silence struck the street like a thunderclap. The merchant dropped his broom. Women gasped behind their hands. Men straightened from their work to stare. Celeste shot to her feet, horror flooding her face. She rushed across the street, grabbing Ruby's hand. "I'm so sorry, sir. She doesn't understand." But Ezra wasn't laughing like the others. His weathered face held something different. Curiosity, maybe. Respect, certainly. Judge Blackwood's jaw tightened. He'd worked too hard building this town's reputation to let such spectacles continue. Decent folk expected proper behavior from everyone, especially those who should know their station. Martha stepped forward, placing herself between Celeste and the growing crowd of onlookers. "Ruby's just being friendly. No harm in a child's innocent words." The judge's cold stare fixed on Martha. Some friendships cause more trouble than they're worth. Over the following days, Ezra began leaving small gifts on the hotel's front steps. A carved wooden horse for Ruby, peppermint sticks wrapped in brown paper, fresh wildflowers that brightened Celeste's workspace. Celeste tried ignoring the gestures, but Ruby's excitement made it impossible. The child treasured each gift, displaying them proudly in their tiny room behind the hotel's kitchen. Martha noticed other changes too. When guests complained of stomach ailments, Celeste suggested specific teas that worked remarkably well. When the hotel's account books showed errors, Celeste quietly corrected the mathematics. When traveling families arrived with sick children, those children always seemed healthier after Celeste brought them soup. Judge Blackwood noticed these developments with growing irritation. He'd built his influence on maintaining clear social boundaries. The cleaning woman was overstepping hers. Anonymous notes began appearing, slipped under doors, tucked into coat pockets, left on windowsills. The messages were simple. Know your place. Celeste found the first note on her wash basin. Martha discovered the second in her hotel registry. Ezra pulled the third from his saddlebag. Each message carried the same warning. When Ruby developed a high fever one evening, panic seized Celeste. The town doctor had left for the territorial capital. No other medical help existed for miles. Celeste paced their small room while Ruby shivered beneath thin blankets. The child's temperature climbed dangerously high. Traditional remedies weren't enough. Martha knocked softly on the door. "I sent word to Ezra. He's riding to fetch the doctor from Millerville." Celeste shook her head. "That's a 2-day journey. Ruby doesn't have 2 days." Something in her voice made Martha step closer. Celeste was examining Ruby with professional thoroughness, checking pulse points and breathing patterns with practiced precision. "You know medicine," Martha said quietly. Celeste's hands stilled. "I know enough. More than enough, I'd wager." Their eyes met across Ruby's fevered form. An understanding passed between them. Some secrets were too dangerous to speak aloud, but some circumstances demanded risking everything. Judge Blackwood had noticed the increased activity around the hotel. Late-night visitors, hushed conversations, money changing hands discreetly. He suspected illegal activities and began planning his investigation. The foundations of Millbrook's social order were shifting. Lines that had seemed permanent were blurring. And somewhere in that dangerous territory between what was expected and what was possible, 4 unlikely souls were about to discover that the greatest threats often came from the most unexpected places. If you are enjoying this story of how one innocent question can change an entire community forever, don't forget to comment where you are tuning in from to show how this story can connect us across any distances, backgrounds, and hearts. Because what will happen in the next 15 minutes in Millbrook will completely change everything these characters thought they knew about strength, family, and the power of hidden truths. Ruby's fever broke just before dawn. Celeste had worked through the night, applying cold compresses and administering carefully measured herbal remedies. Her movements carried the precision of someone who understood exactly what each symptom meant. Martha brought fresh water and clean towels. She watched Celeste work with growing certainty. This wasn't folk wisdom or maternal instinct. This was medical training. "Where did you learn to do this?" Martha asked softly. Celeste's hands paused on Ruby's forehead. "Books. I read everything I can find." It wasn't entirely untrue, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Ezra returned that afternoon, dust-covered and exhausted from his frantic ride to Millerville. He'd found the doctor drunk and unwilling to travel. The trip had been wasted. He found Ruby sitting up in bed, color returned to her cheeks, asking for breakfast. Celeste looked equally recovered, though dark circles under her eyes revealed her sleepless vigil. "How?" Ezra asked simply. Martha answered before Celeste could deflect. "She has gifts." 2 days later, those gifts were put to a much more public test. Tom Bradley, one of Ezra's ranch hands, arrived at the hotel bleeding from a deep gash across his forearm. He'd caught it on barbed wire while repairing fence posts. The wound was severe, requiring immediate attention. "Town doctor's still gone," Tom gasped through gritted teeth. "Figured maybe the hotel lady might have some bandages." Martha looked at Celeste. Blood was soaking through Tom's makeshift tourniquet. The nearest medical help remained 2 days away. Celeste stared at the injured man. Every instinct screamed at her to help. Every survival instinct warned her to stay hidden. Ruby tugged at her mother's skirt. "He's hurt bad, Mama." The simple observation broke through Celeste's paralysis. She couldn't let a man suffer when she possessed the skills to help him. "Bring him to the kitchen," she instructed Martha. "I need hot water and clean cloth. Lots of both." What happened next left everyone speechless. Celeste transformed from hotel cleaning woman into something entirely different. She examined the wound with clinical expertise, assessing depth and angle with practiced eyes. Her questions came rapid-fire and precise. "When did this happen? How much blood have you lost? Any dizziness or nausea? She cleaned and sutured the gash with movements that spoke of extensive training. Her hands never trembled. Her technique was flawless. She worked with the confidence of someone who'd performed such procedures countless times. Tom stared in amazement as she bandaged his arm with professional competence. "Ma'am, you just saved my arm. Maybe my life." Word spread quickly through Millbrook. The cleaning woman had performed surgery. Real surgery, not just folk remedies or lucky guesswork. Judge Blackwood arrived at the hotel within hours, demanding explanations. He found Celeste back at her usual tasks, scrubbing floors as if nothing had happened. "I hear you've been playing doctor," he said coldly. Celeste didn't look up from her work. "I helped someone who was bleeding. With surgical techniques." "Where exactly did a cleaning woman learn such skills?" Martha stepped between them. "She learned from books. Some people are naturally gifted at healing." The judge's skeptical expression made clear he wasn't buying such explanations. "I think there's more to this story. Much more." That evening, Ezra cornered Celeste behind the hotel. Tom's bandaged arm had been the talk of the saloon all afternoon. The quality of her work had impressed everyone who saw it. "You're not just someone who reads medical books," Ezra said quietly. Celeste continued hanging laundry, avoiding his gaze. "I don't know what you mean." "The way you examined that wound, the questions you asked, the surgical technique. That wasn't learned from reading." She finally turned to face him. Moonlight revealed the exhaustion in her eyes. Not physical tiredness, but the weariness of carrying secrets too heavy for one person. "What do you want me to say?" she whispered. "The truth." Celeste looked toward their small room where Ruby slept peacefully. Everything she did was for that little girl's safety and future. But secrets had their own weight, their own cost. "I graduated from Howard University," she said finally. "Medical degree, top of my class." Ezra absorbed this revelation without surprise. It explained everything he'd observed about her intelligence, her competence, her quiet dignity. "Dr. Celeste Washington," he said softly. Tears filled her eyes at hearing her proper title spoken aloud. It had been years since anyone acknowledged her true profession. "I came west after my husband died. Thought frontier towns might be more accepting of a woman doctor. I was wrong. Every place I tried, they saw my skin first, my gender second, my medical degree never." She'd been forced to hide her training, taking whatever work she could find to keep Ruby fed and sheltered. The cleaning job at Martha's hotel was just the latest in a series of positions far beneath her qualifications. "So you've been practicing in secret," Ezra realized. Celeste nodded. "Late at night. People who are desperate enough to trust me. Children mostly. Their parents don't care about my skin color when their babies are dying." The magnitude of her sacrifice hit Ezra like a physical blow. She'd given up everything she'd worked for, everything she was, just to survive in a world that refused to see her value. "You're the most remarkable woman I've ever met," he said simply. Before Celeste could respond, Judge Blackwood stepped from the shadows. He'd heard enough of their conversation to piece together the truth. "A colored woman practicing medicine without proper licensing," he said with cold satisfaction. "That's a serious crime in this territory." Judge Blackwood's threat hung in the night air like smoke from a dying fire. Celeste felt the world closing around her, all the careful years of hiding crashing down in a single overheard conversation. "I have a valid medical license," she said quietly. The judge's laugh was sharp and cold. "From where?" "Some northern school that hands out degrees to anyone. That paper means nothing here." Ezra stepped forward, placing himself between Celeste and Blackwood. "Howard University is one of the finest medical schools in the country." "Says who?" "You." Blackwood's eyes glittered with malice. "I think the territorial authorities would be very interested in someone practicing medicine illegally, especially someone who might be taking advantage of desperate families." The accusation hit like a slap. Celeste had never taken a penny for her secret medical work. She helped because people needed help, not for profit. "You know that's not true," Martha said, emerging from the hotel's back door. She'd been listening from the kitchen, ready to defend her employee. Blackwood turned his cold stare on the hotel owner. "And you've been harboring this illegal activity. That makes you an accomplice." The threat was clear: cross him and everyone would pay the price. Word of the confrontation spread through Millbrook like wildfire. By morning, the town had divided into two camps. Those who'd witnessed Celeste's medical skills defended her competence. Others, influenced by Blackwood's accusations, questioned whether she could be trusted. Tom Bradley became her most vocal supporter. He displayed his perfectly healing arm to anyone who'd listen, praising the quality of Celeste's surgical work. His testimony carried weight among the working men who knew him as honest and straightforward. But fear spoke louder than gratitude for many townspeople. Judge Blackwood controlled the bank that held their mortgages. He influenced the territorial officials who could make their lives difficult. Crossing him carried risks most weren't willing to take. Ezra found Celeste packing their few belongings that afternoon. Ruby sat on the narrow bed, clutching her carved wooden horse, confusion clear in her young face. "Where will you go?" Ezra asked. "Somewhere else. There's always somewhere else." Celeste's voice carried the weariness of someone who'd run before. "Or you could stay and fight." She paused in her folding. "Fight with what? I'm one woman against an entire system designed to keep me invisible." "You're not one woman. You have people who believe in you." "I have a few grateful patients and a hotel owner who might lose her business for defending me. That's not enough to change anything." Ruby looked up from her toy horse. "Are we leaving because of what I said at the station?" The innocent question broke Celeste's heart. Her daughter was blaming herself for the chain of events that started with her brave approach to the lonely cowboy. "No, baby, you did nothing wrong." But Ruby's eyes held understanding beyond her years. She'd watched her mother work in shadows, helping people who couldn't help themselves. She'd seen the fear that came with each act of kindness. That evening, families began arriving at the hotel's back door. They came quietly, after dark, carrying sick children and desperate hopes. Word had spread through the community networks that connected working families across racial lines. Mrs. Patterson brought her fevering baby. The Kowalski family carried their unconscious son. The Yamamoto parents supported their daughter between them. All had heard about the woman who could heal what others couldn't. Celeste found herself facing a crisis that made Judge Blackwood's threats seem secondary. Children were dying. She possessed the skills to save them. Everything else was just politics. She worked through the night, moving from patient to patient with systematic efficiency. Ruby helped by fetching supplies and keeping younger siblings calm. Martha coordinated the flow of families, ensuring privacy and safety. Ezra stood guard, watching for any sign of official interference. He'd made his choice. Whatever came next, he'd stand with Celeste and Ruby. By dawn, every child was breathing easier. Fevers had broken. Infections were responding to treatment. Families wept with gratitude as they carried their recovering children home. But success came with consequences. Judge Blackwood arrived with the morning light, accompanied by two territorial marshals. He'd spent the night drafting official complaints and calling in favors from territorial officials. "There she is," he told the marshals, "practicing medicine without proper territorial licensing, endangering public safety with unproven treatments." The senior marshal, a weathered man named Hayes, looked skeptical. "These the endangered patients." He gestured toward the families gathered in the hotel's front room. Parents held healthy, alert children who'd been near death 12 hours earlier. The evidence of successful treatment was impossible to deny. "She got lucky," Blackwood insisted. "Next time someone dies, and we all bear responsibility for allowing this to continue." Martha stepped forward, her voice carrying unexpected authority. "Marshal Hayes, I'd like to see your warrant for this arrest." The marshal shifted uncomfortably. Judge Blackwood said this was an emergency situation. Judge Blackwood has no authority to order territorial arrests. He can request investigation, but he cannot demand immediate action without proper documentation. Her knowledge of legal procedure surprised everyone, including the marshals. Hotel owners weren't typically versed in territorial law enforcement protocols. Blackwood's face flushed with anger. "Are you questioning my authority?" "I'm questioning your jurisdiction," Martha replied calmly. "And I'm suggesting that before anyone makes arrests, we should examine all the evidence, including Dr. Washington's medical credentials and the testimonies of her successful patients." The title she used, Dr. Washington, rang through the room with unmistakable respect. It reframed the entire conversation from illegal practice to potential harassment of a qualified physician. Ezra chose that moment to make his own declaration. He stepped beside Celeste, taking her hand in full view of everyone gathered. "I'm asking Dr. Celeste Washington to marry me," he announced. "She's the finest doctor this town will ever see, and I'm honored she might consider sharing her life with me." Ezra's proposal hung in the air like a challenge thrown down before the entire town. Judge Blackwood's face darkened with fury. The marshals looked uncertain, caught between official complaints and obvious public support for the woman they'd come to arrest. Marshal Hayes cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we'll still need to see those medical credentials." Celeste nodded, her hand still clasped in Ezra's. "They're in my room. I'll fetch them." She returned moments later carrying a leather portfolio that had seen better days. Inside were documents that told the story of her remarkable journey. Diploma from Howard University Medical School, letters of recommendation from professors, clinical training certificates, all legitimate, all impressive, all completely ignored by every frontier town that had refused to see past her skin color. Marshal Hayes examined the papers with growing surprise. "These are from some of the finest medical institutions in the country." "Forgeries," Blackwood insisted. "Anyone can print official-looking documents." Martha stepped forward again, her voice carrying that same unusual authority she displayed earlier. "Marshal, I'd suggest contacting Howard University directly to verify these credentials. Telegraph takes 2 days. Surely we can wait that long before making any arrests." The suggestion was reasonable, but it revealed something that made several people take notice. Martha's knowledge of legal procedures seemed unusually comprehensive for a hotel owner. She spoke like someone intimately familiar with law enforcement protocols. Judge Blackwood sensed he was losing control of the situation. "This woman has been operating in secret, taking money from desperate families. That's fraud, regardless of what papers she carries." "I've never accepted payment," Celeste said quietly. Tom Bradley pushed forward, rolling up his sleeve to display his perfectly healed arm. "She saved my limb, maybe my life. Never asked for a penny." Other families began speaking up. Mrs. Patterson described how Celeste had spent all night treating her baby's fever, refusing even food as thanks. The Kowalskis explained how she'd walked them through caring for their sick son, teaching them techniques they could use if illness struck again. Every testimony painted the same picture: a skilled physician who helped because helping was right, not because helping was profitable. Marshal Hayes looked increasingly uncomfortable with his mission. The evidence before him contradicted every accusation in Blackwood's complaint, but official complaints required official responses, regardless of common sense. "I'm afraid we'll still need to escort Dr. Washington to the territorial capital for a hearing," he said reluctantly. The crowd erupted in protests. Families who'd benefited from Celeste's care spoke over each other, demanding justice. Children she'd treated clung to their parents, confused by the anger filling the room. Ruby stepped forward, her small voice cutting through the noise. "Why do the grown-ups want to hurt my mama? She only helps people." The child's innocent question struck everyone silent. In all the legal arguments and territorial politics, they'd lost sight of the simple truth. A skilled doctor was being threatened for the crime of healing sick children. Martha knelt beside Ruby, her expression gentle but her eyes sharp with purpose. "Sometimes adults make things more complicated than they need to be, but some of us are working to fix that." She stood and faced the marshals directly. "Before you take Dr. Washington anywhere, I have information that might change your perspective on this entire situation." Judge Blackwood stepped forward aggressively. "What information could a hotel owner possibly have that matters here?" Martha's smile was calm and confident. "Information about territorial law, federal jurisdiction, and the legal authority of local judges who exceed their proper powers." The words carried weight that made everyone pay attention. This wasn't casual knowledge picked up from running a business. This was expertise that came from years of professional experience. She continued speaking, her voice gaining strength. "I've been documenting irregularities in this jurisdiction for months. Land deals that bypass proper procedures, bank loans that violate territorial regulations, court decisions that ignore established precedent." Judge Blackwood's face went pale. "You have no authority to investigate anything." "Actually, I do." Martha reached into her hotel registry and withdrew a leather wallet. She opened it to reveal an official badge and identification papers. The documents identified her as Martha Greenfield, retired circuit judge, currently serving as special investigator for territorial authorities. The revelation hit like lightning. The quiet hotel owner who'd been protecting Celeste was actually a federal judge with authority that superseded everyone in the room, including the marshals. Marshal Hayes examined her credentials with growing amazement. "Judge Greenfield, we thought you died back east." "I came west after my husband passed. Thought I'd enjoy quiet retirement running a hotel. But corruption has a way of finding investigators, even retired ones." She gestured toward Judge Blackwood, whose earlier confidence had completely evaporated. "This man has been systematically abusing his position, intimidating residents, manipulating legal procedures, and enriching himself through questionable land acquisitions." The evidence she presented was comprehensive and damning. Financial records showing suspicious transactions, witness statements describing intimidation tactics, documentation of legal procedures ignored or violated. Ezra stared at Martha in amazement. The protective hotel owner had been a powerful ally all along, working behind the scenes to gather evidence against the corrupt system that threatened families like his and Celeste's. Judge Blackwood made one last desperate attempt to maintain control. "Even if that's all true, it doesn't change the fact that this woman was practicing medicine illegally." Martha's response was swift and decisive. "Dr. Washington's credentials are completely valid under territorial law. Her volunteer medical work violated no regulations. But your attempt to use official processes for personal harassment violates several federal statutes." She turned to Marshal Hayes. "I'm officially requesting that you arrest Silas Blackwood on charges of abuse of office, intimidation of citizens, and corruption of territorial proceedings." The power dynamic in the room shifted completely. The man who'd arrived threatening Celeste now faced federal charges himself. The woman he dismissed as an illegal practitioner stood vindicated by a federal judge's authority. Ruby tugged at Celeste's skirt, confusion clear in her young face. "Mama, does this mean we don't have to run away anymore?" Ruby's innocent question hung in the air as Marshal Hayes processed the complete reversal of his mission. He'd arrived to arrest a doctor, and instead found himself facing a corrupt judge exposed by a federal investigator. "Judge Greenfield, your authority supersedes our local orders," Hayes said formally. "What are your instructions?" Martha's response was swift and clear. "Dr. Washington is free to continue her medical practice without interference. Mr. Blackwood will be escorted to the territorial capital to face federal charges." Blackwood's composure finally cracked. "You can't do this. I've served this community for years. These people depend on my leadership." "These people deserve honest leadership," Martha replied. "Something you stopped providing long ago." The families gathered in the hotel lobby began to understand they were witnessing justice in action. The man who'd used fear to control their community was being held accountable by someone with real authority. Tom Bradley stepped forward, his healed arm serving as evidence of Celeste's competence. "Judge Greenfield, this town needs a real doctor, Dr. Washington saved my limb and probably my life. She's helped dozens of families." Other voices joined his. Parents described midnight visits when their children burned with fever. Workers told of injuries treated with professional skill. Each testimony built a comprehensive picture of Celeste's impact on the community. Marshal Hayes took notes as person after person spoke. The evidence was overwhelming. Far from being a danger to public safety, Dr. Washington had been providing essential medical services that saved lives. "Ma'am, based on these testimonies, I see no grounds for any charges against you," Hayes told Celeste officially. "Your medical license is valid, your practice has been beneficial, and you violated no territorial regulations." Celeste felt tears threatening as the weight of years of hiding lifted from her shoulders. To be publicly acknowledged as a legitimate physician, to have her skills recognized rather than feared, was beyond what she dared hope. Ezra squeezed her hand gently. "So what do you say to my proposal?" Before Celeste could answer, Ruby jumped between them with 8-year-old excitement. "Say yes, Mama. He's nice and he likes my drawings and he makes you smile." The child's endorsement drew laughter from the assembled crowd. Even Marshal Hayes cracked a smile at Ruby's enthusiasm. Martha cleared her throat, drawing attention back to official business. "There's one more matter to address. This community needs proper medical facilities. Dr. Washington shouldn't have to work out of hotel rooms and kitchen tables." She gestured toward a storefront across from the hotel that had stood empty for months. "I own that building. I'm donating it to serve as Millbrook's first official medical clinic." The announcement stunned everyone. Martha's generosity would provide Celeste with a proper place to practice medicine openly and professionally. "I can't accept such a gift," Celeste protested. "It's not charity. It's an investment in this community's health and future." Judge Blackwood, flanked by marshals preparing to escort him away, made one final bitter observation. "You think changing buildings changes everything. These people won't truly accept her. This frontier paradise you're creating won't last." His words carried the poison of someone determined to spread doubt even in defeat. But Tom Bradley's response cut through the negativity with simple truth. "I accept her. She saved my arm when no one else could. That's all the acceptance that matters." Other voices echoed his sentiment. Mrs. Patterson nodded firmly. "She saved my baby's life." The Kowalski family added their support. "She taught us how to care for our son." Each declaration weakened Blackwood's attempt to sow division. The community was choosing hope over fear, competence over prejudice. Martha addressed the crowd with judicial authority. "I'm establishing a town council to replace the corrupt system Mr. Blackwood created. We'll need honest citizens willing to serve their neighbors rather than enrich themselves." Hands rose throughout the room. People who'd been intimidated into silence by Blackwood's rule were ready to participate in legitimate governance. Ezra looked at Celeste with growing admiration. "You're watching your real medical practice begin. What does that feel like?" "Terrifying," she admitted honestly. "I've hidden for so long I'd forgotten what it's like to work openly." "You won't be working alone," Martha assured her. "This community will support its doctor." Ruby tugged at her mother's skirt again. "Mama, you still didn't answer about getting married." Celeste knelt to her daughter's level. "What do you think? Should I marry the nice cowboy who waited 3 days at the station?" "Yes. Then we'll be a real family, and he can teach me to ride horses, and you can make sick people better, and we won't have to move anymore." The child's vision of their future was simple but complete. Stability, purpose, belonging, everything Celeste had thought impossible just days earlier. She stood and faced Ezra directly. "I'll marry you on one condition." "Name it." "You understand that I'm not just getting a wife. You're getting a doctor who will be called out at all hours, who will sometimes put patients before everything else, who will always fight for people who need help." Ezra's smile held complete acceptance. "I'm getting exactly the woman I hoped for. Strong, brilliant, dedicated to serving others. I wouldn't want you any other way." Marshal Hayes finished securing Blackwood for transport and approached Martha with professional respect. Judge Greenfield, the territorial governor, will want a full report on your investigation. He'll have it within the week, along with my recommendations for preventing similar corruption in other frontier jurisdictions. As the marshals escorted Blackwood away, his reign of intimidation ended quietly. No dramatic confrontation, no violence, just justice applied through proper legal channels. The crowd began dispersing, but the energy remained celebratory. Millbrook was getting its first official doctor, its first honest government, and its first real hope for a better future. Ruby skipped between her mother and Ezra, already planning their new life together. "Can we have the wedding at the train station where I asked you the question?" 3 months later, Millbrook Station bustled with wedding preparations. The same platform where Ezra had waited in loneliness, and Ruby had asked her brave question now overflowed with flowers, white ribbons, and celebrating townspeople. Celeste adjusted her wedding dress in the hotel mirror, still amazed by how completely her life had transformed. The simple white gown had been a gift from the women of Millbrook, sewn collectively by hands that had once avoided her gaze, but now sought her medical expertise regularly. Her medical clinic across the street bore a painted sign that read Dr. Celeste Washington, physician. Patients visited openly during daylight hours instead of creeping through back doors under cover of darkness. Children no longer had to suffer, while their parents debated whether seeking her help was worth the social risk. Ruby burst into the room wearing a yellow dress and carrying a basket of wildflower petals. Her role as flower girl filled her with importance that radiated in every movement. "Mama, everyone's here. Even people from other towns came to see you get married." Word of the wedding had spread throughout the territory. The story of the corrupt judge's downfall and the brilliant doctor's vindication had become local legend. People traveled from distant settlements to witness what many considered impossible, a love story that had overcome every social barrier. Martha knocked on the door, wearing her finest dress and carrying an official-looking document. As the territory's only available judge, she would perform the ceremony. "Ready to make this official?" Martha asked with a warm smile. Celeste nodded, though butterflies danced in her stomach, not from doubt about marrying Ezra, but from the public nature of their declaration. After years of hiding, stepping into full view of the community still felt overwhelming. The three women walked toward the station platform together. The crowd parted respectfully, faces showing the genuine affection Celeste had earned through months of dedicated medical service. Tom Bradley stood near the front, his completely healed arm testament to her skill. Mrs. Patterson held her healthy baby, now thriving under Celeste's care. The Kowalski family waved from the back, their son robust and energetic after his recovery. Ezra waited at the altar they'd constructed from railroad ties and white cloth. His face glowed with happiness and pride. Not the condescending pride of someone doing charity, but the genuine joy of a man who'd found his perfect partner. The ceremony began with Martha's clear, judicial voice carrying across the platform. "We gather today not just to witness a marriage, but to celebrate the triumph of love over fear, competence over prejudice, and hope over despair." Her words captured the significance beyond the personal. This wedding represented change, progress, the possibility of building communities based on merit rather than narrow-minded tradition. When time came for vows, Ezra spoke first. "Celeste, you've shown me that real strength isn't in hiding from the world, but in serving it despite its flaws. I promise to stand beside you, support your calling as a healer, and help build the life you and Ruby deserve." Celeste's response came from the heart. "Ezra, you saw worth in us when others saw only problems. You chose love when others chose fear. I promise to share this journey with courage, knowing we're stronger together than apart." Ruby stepped forward during the ring exchange, presenting both bands with ceremonial seriousness that made the crowd smile. Martha pronounced them married as the sun reached its peak, symbolically marking the beginning of their bright new life together. The celebration that followed transformed the entire town. Tables appeared filled with food contributed by dozens of families. Music filled the air as someone produced a fiddle, and others joined with harmonicas and voices. Children ran between the adults, playing games that crossed every social boundary. Their innocent joy reminded everyone that the next generation would inherit a more open, accepting community. As evening approached, the newlyweds prepared for their honeymoon journey to the territorial capital. They'd return in a week to begin their life as Millbrook's first family, but for now, they deserved time alone together. Ruby hugged them both fiercely. She would stay with Martha during their absence, but the separation was temporary. For the first time in her young life, she had permanence and security. The train arrived with its familiar whistle and steam. The same locomotive that had brought Ezra to wait for a bride who never came now carried him away with the family he'd actually found. As they settled in their seats, Celeste watched Millbrook disappear behind them. The town that had once seemed like just another place to hide had become home. "Any regrets?" Ezra asked softly. "Only that it took us so long to find each other." A week later, they returned to find their new house ready for occupancy. The community had worked together to prepare a home suitable for the town doctor and her family. It sat between the medical clinic and the school, symbolically positioned at the heart of Millbrook's future. Ruby raced through the rooms, claiming the bedroom with windows facing the train station. She wanted to watch for other travelers who might need families, just as her brave question had created theirs. 6 months after the wedding, another train arrived at Millbrook Station. A weary traveler stepped off, looking lost and uncertain about his reception in yet another unfamiliar town. Ruby, now 9 and brimming with confidence, approached him with a warm smile. "Are you looking for a place to belong? Because this is a good town for people who need new beginnings." The circle completed itself. The station that had witnessed loneliness, bravery, transformation, and love continued its role as a place where strangers could become family, where hope could triumph over fear, and where one child's innocent question could change everything forever.